Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Growth Roundup. It's a brand new series as a part of the Stripe subscriptions growth community. And today we are excited to have Peter Bergenek. Peter is a growth product design leader. He's been currently working at Reddit, previously at Meta, and a few other places. Last time, Peter, we met was actually at Stripe Sessions, where you joined the roundtable we had, and we talked a lot about subscriptions growth. We talked about acquisition, retention, and monetization, and we wanted to bring that same discussion here to the subscriptions growth community here. And so let's get started by getting to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in product design.
For sure, yeah. Thanks for having me here. And yeah, it was awesome seeing you in San Francisco for the Stripe sessions during the conference. Yeah, how did I get started in product design? I've been doing this for around 15 years or so. Started by hacking stuff in college, like building apps and stuff like that. You know, the iPhone came out in 2007. That was around the time I was like graduating from high school. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. You know, like, so I started reading their guidelines and documentation and I started building apps. I also used to like hack video games and stuff. So, you know, I was like always interested in like the code aspect of things. And then after college, it's actually a really funny story, and not many people know, but like I remember I was just like chilling. This was around 2011 or 2012 or so. I was just like chilling at home and I get a call from a recruiter, and they're like, "Oh, hey, we're building." This was in London. They're like, "We're building a banking app for a client. We're like this agency XYZ. Like, have you previously built banking apps?" And I'm like, "Yeah, totally." I had not. And that's kind of how it started. You know, I came over. I already knew kind of the guidelines, you know, how to use Photoshop back then, all of that stuff, built some like products, but kind of just rolling off of those vibes. Ended up shipping my first like proper design and app and everything. And it kind of snowballed from there. I started working with more agencies, had my own startup, ended up kind of co-founding a startup in San Francisco, started flying to San Francisco from London, and like back and forth. That's where I met Zane. And then it's continued snowballing from there. And then I joined Meta, and then I was at Reddit. But it all started with me just like being really curious about the platform and about the space and just screwing around, right? Like, and I think we were talking about this thing at with some previous colleagues from both Meta and Reddit, as like, because some of them have kids and stuff, and it's like, how do you ensure you continue being like a good designer, or like how do you ensure you stay good in your like space? And the number one answer we kind of like all landed on is like curiosity, right? You have to be a little interested, you have to be like curious about what's developing, what's happening. You have to like experiment and build a lot of the things that you just don't know how they work, because by the process of building and discovering, you understand how a thing functions, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, like I can do this. So I think just like a big part of that, and that's how I got here. That's a long-winded answer of saying I just like screwing around a lot and building stuff in my free time.
Yeah, I love it. So growth design has become a pretty new term. It's become one of the hottest discipline and product
Hmm.
over the last decade. Probably like I would say the last 5 years or so, where it's like proper function within a lot of companies. So tell us a little bit about how do you define growth design, and like how does it differentiate from like traditional product design? Because I know you kind of made that transition from traditional to more
Yeah.
growth design recently.
Yeah, so this is interesting because I've been hiring. Full disclosure, I work at Reddit. I'm not representing the interests of Reddit. I'm representing myself and my journey here. But I'll use examples of we're hiring for uh, growth designers, and it's again the conversation came up like, what's a good growth designer? As I was talking to some of my recruiters versus not, and my take is any designer can be a growth designer if they index on optionality. So when you produce mockups, when the pixels hit the screen, the canvas, a big part of it is option A, option B, option C, mapping to company goals, mapping to metrics, mapping to like both user needs, but being super vigilant of like, how can we increase metric X or Y? And optionality is such a big aspect of that. And it's generally a good thing to have as a designer overall. When I was at Meta, my org was also part of the growth org, and what helps us is once you have that optionality, because like you start with a goal. Like, let's say we want to increase. daily active users, for example, right? Like, okay, cool. Well, how do we increase daily active users? What do they like about the platform? What brings them back to the platform? Let's say like what brings them to the platform is I'm just like for Facebook, I don't know, it's like connecting or talking to your friends, right? Okay, cool. So how do we then like emphasize that message if someone wants to continue using Facebook and we or like Instagram or like any other social platform, and if connecting with friends is the most important thing, we emphasize that during onboarding, doing push notifications, right? Being like, hey, you have X friends like who want to chat with you. So it's satisfying a user need, but also being very clear with the value prop and just being hyper vigilant, not just like, oh, our platform does a lot of stuff. You have to really know what you're kind of selling and kind of be really clear with that value proposition to the user.
Yeah, absolutely. And how would you, say like, what would you say, like, what separates a great, growth designer versus kind of someone that's just, starting out?
Yeah, um, it's a combination of high optionality, craft, the ability to ship fast and that ties into experimentation. We have a lot of principles and a lot of ideas. Let's say we want to increase, daily active users. Cool, that's our metric. We have a bunch of hypotheses. Ultimately, there may be prior research, there may be user experience research, but we don't know until we've tested it, right? And we have to nail down like out of all these like options that we have, work together with product, with engineering to identify what can we ship fast, what do we think has the highest chance of having the highest conversions, and run an A, B, C, D experiment. And that depends on like the organization's experimentation capacity, but like the best thing, and in my opinion, like this is what made Facebook grow so fast is the experimentation culture and the data driven culture. And Reddit's got that as well. And I just think being really, as a designer, really driving that, not like taking like months to be like, oh, we're gonna do this. Just like we have a week or two from like start to finish. Here's the proposal. Let's ship this. Let's go talk to Eng. Let's get it out the door. Moving fast, but also maintaining the high quality bar. And there's stuff that can kind of like empower you, right? Like if you have a good, reliable, and resilient design system, that empowers you to like propose experiments really quick. Um, and you kind of have to identify those blockers as a designer, right? Like, so if you don't have a good design system, fine, you like ship the project, but you build it with a modular intent. At Reddit, we recently launched something that you guys may be seeing soon in prod that like didn't have a system. We created a system. Now the other teams are using that system, so it's like build with scale in mind, and it just really helps because then once you want to do another rev, you just reuse it, tweak some things, and it's good to go. And a lot of the stuff is like learnings from the last like 2 decades of design. They're like table stakes now, but it's the hyperfixation on, as I mentioned, optionality, moving fast, having reliable systems, and getting stuff out the door quick and experimenting. That is ultimately what lands growth. And a lot of it is sometimes just like throwing ideas at the wall and being like, well, like let's try like a wacky idea. Let's identify a new product vertical. Let's like validate it fast. But speed is always like a big part of that without sacrificing quality. And that's not easy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Always like building, a scale in mind. And what would you say are like some of the misconceptions that when it comes to growth design that you find, especially when hiring, you're building a team of growth designers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what would you say are some of the misconceptions that you see?
Mm, I think folks sometimes index on the process rather than on the outcome. I see a lot of designers, especially in interviews, go over like, oh, here's the wireframes, here's like the stickies. Like, that's cool, but it's more the what that matters rather than like how you got there. And I think the industry's shifting in a way where like I'm trying to put this like in nice terms, where someone who was really senior, because considered to be like senior 5 years ago, that's considered like the baseline of starting today. Um,
Mm.
and I think the bar has gone up substantially, but that doesn't mean you're being left behind. It just means you have to emphasize that kind of ability to deliver high quality work fast. But yeah, to like recap and answer your question, it's the impact, it's the what were the numbers, what was your direct contribution, what specifically increased with you shipping this particular design proposal. And metrics is ultimately what makes the world go round. Growth is all about metrics.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about metrics. Like, what are like when you're designing products? Like, what are some metrics that you keep in mind when you're
Yeah,
starting out a project?
For sure. That's why we have strong partnerships with product, right?
Yeah.
And our executive board. Daily active users is probably the biggest one, right? Like they're ultimately your customers. They're the people who are on the platform, who see the ads, who interact, who find value from the platform where they also create value. So it's that's probably one of the core ones. There's also conversion, right? Like sometimes in the case of Reddit, there's a lot of people using it as a resource. Like how do we capture those and make them become users? For example, and TikTok and X have really interesting ways of capturing converting users. It's they essentially gatekeep everything behind an account, so you must create an account, or you like, and they're really heavy with upselling app downloads,
Hmm.
which then has like a lot of downstream effects, right? Like you can do push notifications, they get like better refreshing, they get like better like user experience because it's a native app, but also it's just easier to do better targeting for their interests. So yeah, and that's something we're exploring as well.
Yeah, totally. So tell us a little bit about, we like to cover kind of the holy trinity of like subscription growth. So, what's working and what's not working when it comes to acquisition, retention, and monetization. So, with your experience acquiring new users, typically there's kind of the three pillars of, getting new users. There's kind of like the build, buy, partner,
Yeah.
right? So building would be a lot of like PLG type of motions. Buying is kind of like the ads and kind of like those buy channels, and then partnerships are just partnerships with other
Yeah.
companies or ecosystems. So you're very responsible for kind of the build channel, and we would love to learn more about some of the things that you're noticing in terms of design
Hmm.
patterns when it comes to acquiring new users.
For sure. Depends on the product ultimately, right? Like it comes down to solving a user need. With in Reddit's and Facebook's example and Instagram's, it's a free platform. There are subscriptions you can use, but they don't make up the bulk of it. The majority of revenue comes from ad revenue. So what helps is just by having people on the platform. When we're building for that, I kind of mentioned this in my previous kind of answer. Using a native product generally has better targeting and a better experience, and it ultimately results in a longer retention curves. So our goal quite often, both with like Meta and Reddit and other places I've been to, is like to get people into the app. People just like stick around longer on apps, and you have a lot of venues where you can kind of resurrect them, re-engage them. Emails and also another channel. So the each data point, for example, during onboarding that a user gives you is an ability for you to kind of bring them back and provide them with value. So if you ask for their phone number, so if you ask for their phone number at Facebook, we owned my team. We kind of owned phone number management that kind of fed into the social graph. So if someone finds value in Facebook and connecting with friends, a lot of you listening may have experienced this, where someone comments in it, you get a text message saying like, "Oh, hey, like Bob left a comment." That is such a strong both resurrection and re-engagement loop. It drives so much DAO and monthly active users that like there's a lot of things like that. And then growth is kind of that, like how do you create the flywheel? How do you create the entry points for a user to kind of re-engage with the product perpetually? So we kind of like think about that. And you mentioned like syndication. We work with external partners, like there are other tech companies, and it's like how does in Reddit's case, like how is it perceived on this? How do we bring those kind of people from the external platforms into Reddit? What can we provide those external platforms with? And so you have like the business negotiation side, and then you have like the product negotiation side, right? So the product negotiation side is like we must like what are our principles? We must always provide the user with value first. Once they get the value, then they're interested in coming to the product. But then once they're in the product, we can have those re-engagement loops.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, tell us a little bit about those re-engagement loops. Some of the experiments
Yeah.
that you've seen to be working well, like some of the things that you're seeing in other
Hmm.
products as well. We'd love to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that.
Oh, I have to check what we've launched publicly now versus not, so just to see what I can like speak to. Um, Push notifications. I mentioned this so strong. So when a user is onboarding, for example, a lot of times we like most social apps ask you to allow you to grant access to the push notification feature. Um, some users say yes, some users say no. Those who say yes are like twice as likely to return because now you have a channel of like sending them interesting content, right? Like with Reddit, it could be like digest. With Facebook, it could be like it's commentary posts, etc. And you can tailor it using ML for like you can kind of identify based on the onboarding signals what a user likes. Are they more of a passive consumer? Are they like an active consumer? If you know they're a contributor, like be like, hey, there's a community here. Have you considered posting here? Or like you created a thread. Here's like the summary for your thread. Uh, kind of post. But if you're more passive, it's like, oh, hey, these topics are kind of happening on this particular subreddit or like in this community on like Instagram or whatever. Here's what you missed. It all comes down to reminding user of the value that the platform has, but also not giving all of it away externally, right? Like I think what I've seen is experiments where emails kind of go out or push notifications that kind of give you the detail for everything, so you don't even need to come back into the app. So you need to give enough value, but also have like a hook to have you come back inside to discover even more, so as to not give everything away.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Curious, you talked a bit about acquisition, getting new users. We talked about re-engagement. What
Ooh,
about
actually,
like,
sorry,
yeah,
can I
go ahead.
interrupt for a second? You just reminded me
Yeah.
for acquisition. So this is both comes from my like startup days and like working with tech companies. I noticed that what for acquisition, paid acquisition, i.e., paying for ads on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, it brings a lot of traffic in, but the conversion rates are generally not the highest. And it's interesting versus compared to like organic growth. You always want to focus on organic growth. That's like the best possible lever that you can have.
Yeah, and in terms of organic growth, what are like some ways that you've seen work effectively? I mean, I guess it depends on the product itself.
Yeah.
Products like there's different strategies for organic growth, right? Like there's referrals. There's
Hmm.
also there's ways to expand teams. Curious, like what are some trends that you're seeing when it comes to organic growth nowadays?
For sure. I think part of it is identifying the flywheel, right? Like
Hmm.
how do you attract someone? How do you have them engage? And how do you have them refer or come back? But 100% that, right? Like for social platforms, humans are social creatures. We like, this is what we're doing right now, right? Like we're having a conversation. We enjoy this kind of stuff. How do we tie into like providing that kind of value? And sharing is a big part of it. Like if you find like, don't make it hard for a user to share interesting content with their friends. Because chances are like, if you're on an Instagram, another person's going to be like, you're like a smaller product, right? Like if you're on Reddit, chances are like if you send me something, I'll check it out, I'll like get hooked on it, and I'll start like exploring other things. um and it's just utilizing every possible venue, right? Like a lot of startups, they're like, oh, we need to have like an MVP. An MVP is good when you solve a user problem, but then how do you continue educating them on the user problem? Through experience, right? You don't tell them what necessarily they're missing, but you kind of show them. Sharing is a really good example of like, hey, here's the product, like check this out. Here's other stuff that's happening, and they're like, oh, cool. You send me a link to like a Reddit thread. I'm like, oh, sick. Let me check this out. Like the World Cup is happening, for example.
Hmm.
I read about it, and then like, there's like an upsell for something else. I click on it, and it's like, oh, hey, download the app. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Well, I've got value. Let me try it out. Uh, Another like acquisition channel is it is ads, but ads, I think if you need to really know who you're targeting and what communities you're targeting. So there's specific topics that are highly relevant to a platform. Um, I think seasonal stuff is really kind of there as well. For example, the World Cup, right? Like it would make a lot of sense to partner with those companies and have either ads or communities that do discuss the World Cup on Reddit, for example, make it clear that like, hey, this is what's happening on the platform. So even if someone is referred to Reddit and you send me a share for something else, like maybe like I'm just spitballing here, like would make sense to have like some sort of like, hey, here's like what's happening on the platform, what's interesting, what's like in the zeitgeist of society, and that kind of gets you interested in there. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, those are some great, yeah, especially like, yeah, when it comes to consumer products, those are some great strategies. Also, would love to learn more about, how you think about, retention. So,
Hmm.
when it comes to like, especially like, free products, I think you've, over the last few years, you've been working on free products. How do you think about retention? And what are some like design, product
Hmm.
design things that you've implemented that have helped with that?
Yeah, for sure. And like you mentioned, right, like it's part of the product journey, right? Like you acquire them, you have to convert them. Sorry, you convert them, you acquire them, and then you have to retain users. And churn is a real thing. freshness. A lot of it comes down to relevance and a lot of ML stuff, right? Like relevance, relevant content. If your platform, like if I care about a bird watching community in like, North San Francisco, there's not a large one, and I tried checking a platform that kind of had some steam going and then it disappeared. I'm not going to come back. And like, no matter how many times you try bringing me back, I'm not going to come back because I see nothing's being posted, right? So you have to have relevant content and freshness of content and user generated content. And then on the design side, it's your responsibility to map it to the consumer, right? Be like, hey, we know you really like this. This is where we partner with Eng. Be like, hey, what can we learn about the user? What can we actually provide a value prop on? And then remind them like to like retain, show them other relevant communities. A big part is also what we found to be really valuable is community cross-selling, right?
Mm.
So like you're on one community and chances are if you like, I'm trying to come up. We were talking about planes earlier. I like to kind of spitball here. Like, if you like planes, maybe you like other mechanical stuff, maybe a car subreddit, like or something like that, right? Like, and how do we serve that in an elegant way, which doesn't detract you from the content, but also shows you like interesting information that continues like re-engaging, and it maps to that UGC aspect. But yeah, it's just like specifically from a UX perspective, it's giving value through experiencing the product rather than telling. So show, don't tell, right? As a
Mm.
principle we've definitely explored previously.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then now just, your original background, remember we're talking a little bit earlier, has been in kind of fintech products, right? And you've done a bit of work in monetization as well. I remember,
Hmm.
the early work in different startups, you did think a lot about monetization. How do you kind of get now users to pay for products? Um, Maybe more recently, how do you think about it? When it comes to monetization, like how do you
Yeah.
what's kind of the growth product
Yeah.
design take on that?
My, well, there's my take and there was where the industry is headed, right?
Yeah.
Like my take for any consumer product, freemium seems to have won. Right? Like
Yeah.
nobody's going to, I mean, you'll have like if it's a really niche use case and you solve like a very small user need, people will pay, but generally users want to try before they buy. And subscriptions just provide additional value for like consumer products, right? For social companies, the scale is what makes drives the revenue, right? So because you can lean into the advertising aspect, but that's not everyone could be like a 3 billion daily active user company like Meta, for example, right? So and at that point, you need to like figure out what are you willing to give away for free? What do you want to paywall? You definitely have to have some sort of like core aspect that a user will be happy with being using for free. Um, B2B, on the other hand, I'd say is like probably the opposite, right? Like once you solve a company's need of there's very clear uh, saving of costs, reduction of costs, they will happily pay you for that because like
Mm.
it's a balance sheet. It's really easy to compare numbers and for them to just like pay a subscription when it saves like a certain percentage off of their like overhead. But for consumer stuff, you have to have some sort of free aspect or a trial period and ensure that users are using it. And then you remind them of how much value that brings if they're out of the trial period. And the growth mindset in that space is like send them emails. Emails are so powerful. Like everyone hates them. We all
Mm.
hate getting them, but they're such a powerful re-engagement and growth lever. It's kind of funny because emails are also like a pain in the ass to design for because they're like running in what like HTML like two or like CSS2 or like it's you have to use tables. It's wacky.
Yeah, for sure. It's always interesting, right? Like, yeah, with freemium products, always, you get the people to use the product for free for a bit. You kind of have those upgrade nudges for the trial and trial to paid and then paid to kind of, expansion. And then from there, like moving into, land and expand approaches for if you want to get into enterprise. Now we're kind of seeing also a lot of changes in terms of like the whole pricing model, right? Like in
Hmm.
over the last few years, there was kind of the traditional subscription, you pay for the service and you get pretty much everything. And then seat-based pricing got introduced, right, where you add team members, you pay for each seat. And I think now those are kind of going away, and we're seeing more and more usage-based pricing, right? In the Stripe session, the roundtable, we were talking a lot about gamification of pricing,
Hmm.
and I think that's a pretty interesting area, especially when it comes for product designers. Like, how do you gamify, pricing, and how do you gamify people paying for products and kind of that whole usage base? How do you think about that? as you're like playing around with products and also maybe with your current experience?
For sure. I actually think Adobe is exploring something. So, but like
Mm.
into this, in our space, AI is everywhere, right? Like, and AI runs on tokens. And what we as industry have done, we've monetized tokens. And when you have that abstraction layer of tokens are like a abstract number that doesn't easily map to a cost, I think it's easier to abstract and be like, oh, hey, buy like, 20x tokens for this price or
Mm.
whatever. And it's something we've been seeing happen. I think video games kind of started doing this a while ago as well. Like you buy in-game coins or gold or whatever, and then they can use that to buy in-app products. I think it's kind of seeping into software as well because of the way how like a lot of AI products function because it's usage based, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
and the consumption of tokens is it's like consumption based. So like an abstraction layer generally always helps with growth because it's harder for humans to map a direct value conversion. That's why like ultimately like the earliest version of that is like a gift card, you could argue, right? Like you kind of buy into a company's ecosystem and then you're going to use up uh that kind of value. But it's I think we'll just continue seeing more of that. On our end we don't have that. Again, it's kind of lean into ads. But you're making me think. I'm like, can you do some sort of tokenization or anything? Live product idea generation, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's always interesting, with just kind of getting people started within the product, right? And you've worked from products from scratch. I remember, you're designing different apps in the early
Mm.
days, and then I guess like throughout your journey in your previous company, like you thought about onboarding, right? Like how do you get people started? So what would you say like are some of the things that you've learned on what makes a great onboarding experience, and how are the patterns changed over the last few years?
Yeah. It's it used to well, users hate onboarding. We need onboarding to collect signal to know what you want, right? Like so those two things are at odds. I actually think onboarding is a really good example of a company need that a company like 100% needs versus a user kind of doesn't really care about it. They just want to get into the product.
Hmm.
Um, from our learnings, I think you can do elegant things, right? You should always give the user an escape hatch. Like if they want to skip after a certain point, fine, get them into the product, but have follow-ups. Have like you know, for both companies. Like if you're in the feed, if you then give a specific signal, like let's say you didn't share your location, which is fine. Not everyone wants to share their location, but have like, as you're scrolling through the feed, be like, oh, hey, want to see like relevant stuff near you. Like we can probably tell based on IP if you're like in SF, like want to see stuff that's relevant to you in San Francisco, share your location, discover more like interesting things, right? But like tie it to value or be like your friend, like I'm trying to remember like for Facebook examples, like for address book sharing, right? Because it helps build us the social graph. The social graph connects you with people, which then makes you come back to the product. It's like, oh, hey, like five friends of yours share their address book, share yours and stay connected or whatever, right? Like the value prop is there. Um, it's really hard also just having like we really have to avoid like screens with bullet points and text. At Facebook, it was always a challenge because legal is like, well, we have to have those disclosures. It's a must have. Users absolutely do not read anything at all. So how do you reconcile that, right? Like, so you use like visuals to communicate that. You maybe have some sort of animation or motion, but you also weave in the value prop. It's like, oh, you share your address book, but that means you connect with people. So you could have like, oh, address book, like upload animation, and then like all your friends who you've previously connected with, like on IG or Facebook or whatever, like the animation kind of like pops out of there. Like you can have visual metaphors. Um, and if they then don't do that, you can always like follow up later once they're in the product, and then we utilize the notification tray for like, hey, like X number of people uploaded their like address books or whatever, like do that. And then like other kind of points of entry within the app for signal acquisition, because signal just helps you find the product.
Hmm.
But to kind of to like step back and answer your question, I think users prefer zero or minimal onboarding and they just want to get into the product. But like if you get them into the product and the signal is bad and you show them content that's not relevant, they're gonna bounce anyway. So sometimes you have to force them to do it through because they're also like users may hate it, they'll still do it, right? Like just don't like make it completely crap. And I think hyper targeting is a big part of it as well. If we know like if we know that a user is more likely, be based in geography or other inferences, to provide one type of signal rather than the other, let's dynamically serve that flow rather than
Mhm.
the other and chain them and then experiment, right? Uh, at FB, there was, that's generally how it works, right? Like it takes modules and those modules are dynamically served during onboarding depending on like signal. That's a very complex ML engine, right? But like it was worth an investment because then you had like higher, like based on the probability, higher conversion rates, we get better signal. You signal, users more likely to return. It kind of creates like a positive feedback loop. So uh, comes down to like experiment, have it dynamic, don't have like a hard coded onboarding flow unless like you're in an MVP stage, right? But like as you get more mature, it's really important to like hyper target.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, experimentation is key, as you mentioned. Tell us a little bit about how you approach experimentation. I know it's a big part of all the companies that you've worked at.
Hmm.
How do you think about it? Like, how do you approach it?
We have this. We started calling this, and I've been using this term. There's vibes and there's metrics, right?
Yeah.
I think when we're doing a lot of companies when they plan features is generally vibes over metrics, but we should be the other way around, right? Like, what do the metrics tell us? We should have product sense. We should have like an intuition, but we need to validate it with numbers. And if our intuition is wrong, that's cool, right? But that's where optionality that I previously mentioned comes in really valuable. It's like, all right, cool. Well, our hypothesis A failed. We had another one. Let's try this one. And how do we kind of, and experimentation, writing concurrently, right, is really important.
Mhm.
Now the challenge is, I was talking to another friend who has his startup. Like we were talking about experimentation, and he's like, I don't really have the scale. I can't really run like a BCD test when I have like 500 paying customers, per month. I can't really like do all of that. So like, what do you do then? And it's a good question, right? At that point, you can start leaning into like qualitative learnings with like user experience research. Recruiting them, working with your clients, identifying what they really want, versus what they don't. And it comes and ultimately comes down to like you have to engage with your users and know how they're using the product. Quantitative experimentation works at scale. Qualitative works at more a smaller size, and it gives you deeper feedback. So it's also like just balancing those.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And let's shift gears a little bit about your workflows. Over the last year or so, like workflows for pretty much every product manager and product designer have changed, right? There's
Mhm.
like so many new tooling now, and let's talk a little bit about AI workflows and what how has your workflow evolved over the years?
Yeah, for sure. The hot question. AI is really, really good at some things, and it's a complete wild card at some other ones. And I think we're
Mhm.
going through this journey in the industry where we're trying to see if AI works at every possible use case and are discovering that it's like really, really good at some things and then a hot mess at other things, right? AI is really empowered our design org in shipping prototypes, live code prototypes that connect to like our backends and live data, and the designer can now just like build a prototype without. And Figma's is very underwhelming, right? It's like just like
Mhm.
hot click area. It's very, and I may be aging myself here, like similar to like Envision Powerboard, right? Like where you like uploaded PNGs, selected like slices, and they would just link them to each other. That's like Figma's is a little more complex, but it still kind of is within that space. You can't really have like or like you can have more complex prototypes. It's a pain in the butt with AI. You can just like link your Figma to Cursor, especially if you have like some sort of understanding of code. It just makes it like so much easier. That you can land PRs, they can have like a link, you can share it with leadership. They can use it, it's live data, everyone's using it. Engineering can be like, oh, this is cool. And they're like, we can't
Mhm.
build this, but we can build this. So it just increases the pace of how quickly we can get things out there and tested. It's also so powerful for UXR. Our
Mhm.
designers now can just like build a prototype, and the same link goes to like the CEO. The same link goes to our users that we test with, right? The same link goes to like me. I can like play around with it, and it's great. Then we're actually kind of already getting feedback on that anyway, right? And it just makes life so much easier. We tried using it for like whiteboarding and then like uploading those whiteboarding mocks into an AI, being like, hey, how would you like design this using our design systems? it's okay for like ideation and prototyping, like
Mhm.
Figma making stuff, but not like for the final product. But like it increases the velocity at how quickly we can move
Yeah.
and ship stuff, which I think is great because like in growth, speed is always important. You can't spend a month designing a feature. You have like a week, so it really empowers us in terms of doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about some advice that you might have for founders. I remember, again, in your early career, you worked directly with founders, like launch products 0 to 1. Some of them got acquired as well. Um,
Good
you
times.
know, so would love to learn about, what you think are like some of the mistakes that startups currently make when it comes to design.
hmm Um, I haven't worked with startups for like a hot minute, so my perception might be a bit out of date. What I've seen is a lot of startups just like throw together like a landing page with Claude, and I can immediately tell if it's been built with Claude. And like
Yeah.
I immediately am like, ooh, like this is gross because it's just using the same grid layout, gives it like a couple of
Yeah.
gradients, right? And you can immediately tell. There's a lot of value in having, especially if it's a B2 C product that looks like it actually cares about the user and is not just trying to shill something, right? And I think the theme for this like chat is that I kind of like want to emphasize is like you should always be providing value to the user because if you solve a problem of theirs, they will come to you,
Yeah.
right? But you're not off to a great footing if like you're the first thing that the customer experiences looks like vibe coded schlock, right?
Yeah.
Like it's ultimately like people are smart, right? Like they can tell. So I think putting in a bit of effort and craft into the high traffic or like the entry experiences is like will pay dividends.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So, I really appreciate you kind of answering all these questions. We covered, strategies for acquisition, retention, monetization, as well as some of the experimentation
Mhm.
approach that you've taken. I'd love to ask you some rapid fire questions and
Let's
then
do it.
we'll wrap it up. So, favorite product?
Digital or physical or
Both. It could be both.
both. I like cars. I like automotive stuff, right? Like I think the automobile is a wonderful in terms of product design. It's such a complex thing that so many it's both hardware, software, it's just, cultural zeitgeist as well. It's a very interesting space. Uh, Digital. I mean, I'm a terminally online Redditor. I use Reddit, so that's probably my number one visited product, and that was
Yeah.
part of what if I joined. Like, I love the platform so much. There's so many things to do there, and it's just like a really good product. I think it could grow and improve, but if term in terms of like actual usage, I'd say it's that.
All right. So, Reddit, favorite product. All right. Most underrated design principle.
I've been seeing. I don't think it's the most underrated one, but I've been seeing a lot of junior designers kind of create navigation flows that don't take you back where you started from. And one of the core principles of like interface guidelines for both, Apple and Google, and just like in general usability is like a user should be able to come back to where they started from. And I started noticing a lot of like information architecture now has like you end up like in a weird section of something and you don't know how do you get back and you're like, right, cool, how'd I end up here, right? So I think just like relying on the good old reliable principles, I think a lot of people deviate from them, and that's fine if you have a good reason to, but they're there for a reason and they're universal and like they're tailored for humans and humans are kind of going to be the same for a while, right? So I think we just have to keep in mind the fundamentals. Those will not change, that those will adapt to the new surfaces that we're on.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Another question I had was, yeah,
Oh, and
around.
sorry, one more thing. This may be a hot take. I think liquid glass is pretty terrible. Maybe a very hot take, but among my fellow design peers, but I think that was a somewhat of an L from Apple.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see when companies launch their new design systems, and but yeah, definitely not a huge fan either. But what would you say is like a most overrated growth tactic?
Most overrated growth
Yeah.
tactic. I think selling ads.
Mm. Yeah.
Selling ads on specifically like paid acquisition on platforms like TikTok and Meta. Like you get a lot of traffic, but if you're not, or sorry, not optimizing your ads well, just like spamming ads, like the ads themselves are valuable, but like not having intentional ads, you're just burning money. You're just gonna like a bunch of people will see it, the wrong people will see it. They'll be like, cool. They'll check it out. They will not convert. And you just burned, like 20 grand trying to like screw around.
Yeah, for sure. And what's a favorite AI tool?
Whatever the latest model is of the week, they change weekly, so you have to bounce. Sometimes it's Claude, sometimes it's Gemini, sometimes it's OpenAI. I have a local LLM running at home on my
Hmm.
machine. Managed to find a 5090 at a non insane price, and kind of set that up. So Hugging Face, not sure if you've used it, but like it's
Hmm.
a public repo for open source models. I love screwing around with them so much because you could get some hilarious ones, and there's some weird mutated ones on there, which is like a merge of Opus and Quen or like other ones. It's a fun rabbit hole, but I think they keep changing every week. My go to at work is Gemini because I think
Hmm.
Google has just better workplace integration with everything. For coding and engineering, Claude's the go-to,
Hmm.
and OpenAI just used for like personal, like random questions and search.
Yeah.
So all of them.
Yeah, similar to my workflow as well. I would say, yeah. What's a company that you think every designer should study?
Um, I think this will come as no surprise. Apple's guidelines, human interface guidelines, you should brush up on those annually. If you don't do it annually, at least every couple of years. Like the
Mm.
fundamentals are so good. Uh, they don't necessarily follow their own guidelines, but it's just a good baseline understanding. And same for the Google Material guidelines. It's like I was saying in my previous answer, right? Like it comes from a place of understanding human thinking rather than the surface. And we'll always see the same. In terms of design, who's doing like interesting things? I think we have this like I may go on a rant, but like especially in the AI space, everyone's kind of trying to look like the same, and it's kind of getting confusing. And stuff, I see ads for five different companies, and it's the same style of ad, black background with like a terminal UI, and that's it. And I'm like, I don't even remember the company name. Like, what do you guys even do? Just like the name of the thing, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. So I think a lot
Yeah.
of maybe the inverse of I feel like a lot of companies right now are just like regressing to the mean, or not even regressing to the mean, but it's just like this lack of identity, and it's. I think minimalism is good, but you can stand out, right? You can do something unique, and
Mm.
and I don't think we're doing enough of that. What would be I do want to bring up design in the automotive space, and I'm not sure how many people are aware of this. Like Ferrari recently launched their new EV, which was designed by Johnny Ive. Johnny Ive is the guy who
Mm.
designed the iPhone. He was Apple's kind of chief designer, and Ferrari hired him to design their first ever EV. Individual parts of it look really nice when you're zoomed in on the UI or like a one corner, but overall it looks really bad. It's been met with like ridicule and mockery, and it looks it's you know it's not the most aesthetically looking car. It's the Ferrari Luce.
Mm.
Um, they're sticking with it, but like the execution overall, like is you can see where the influence from Apple and Johnny Ive's perspective of how to design consumer goods, he applied it to a vehicle, and I think that's a really interesting example of how it doesn't necessarily fully translate. I'm not sure if you can like bring it up on the screen share or not. I'm happy to kind of like dive into that, just kind of like to show the users, but the listeners on the podcast. But
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you can. Where can they find it? Like maybe they can just look it up.
oh, just like yeah, look it up Ferrari Luce Luce.
Oh yeah, yeah, Ferrari.
You've probably seen it. Yeah, it looks like a thing. If you like crop one part of it, it looks interesting, but the full picture is kind of you're like, what? This is like a 600K car. What?
Oh, interesting. Let's see if I can share. This would be.
Oh, nice.
This
Yeah,
is
you're screen
it.
sharing.
There it
Like,
is. Ferrari
like,
EV
like it's
Luce.
cool for a 60K Prius, or right? Like, but for a 600K car, like, yeah, if you go to Google image search and just like, oh yeah, there's like side pictures of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Cool. Yeah. Well, people should take a look at it
yeah.
when they
So
get a
I think that's a
chance.
good example of like using tech or Apple style thinking and applying it to an automotive space, and it has not been met with positive reception whatsoever. Even though I assume the craftsmanship, the functionality, and the mechanics are all like stellar.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciate answering all the questions. We're going to take maybe a question from the audience, and then we'll wrap it up. So Miguel here, Miguel is actually a regular attendee. He comes to the Stripe sessions that we have at the office. So he's asking, how do you think about communicating value to users?
Yeah, for sure. You either show to them through the user experience, right? So for Reddit, if you're browsing a community, you get to the bottom or like the middle of a post, why not like show other communities and rich media and stuff that's kind of like available, right? Like give them open doors to other functionality within the app that they can screw around with or play around with. If you're going for a very growth hacky one, you can block certain experiences and be dynamic with the disclosures. Be like, hey, discover X, discover. I don't know if you're like browsing, yeah, let's say browsing the World Cup, right? Like, and you can technically block the experience and be like, oh, discover more sports on, our platform. Click here to like sign up or download the app or whatever. So you can do some gating. All the social platforms use it. Maybe whatever product you have can experience that as well. Be like, oh, like you're trying to like what will be I'm trying to apply this to like a fintech product and let's see if it works, right? Be like, oh, download bulk like statements or whatever by like downloading the app and like customizing it and then kind of give them how the UI would like look, kind of
Perfect.
dangle some of that in front of them.
Cool. Hope that answered your question, Miguel. Thanks for the question. Well, we're just out of time, and Peter, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. This has been incredible. It's always fun to interview your own friends that you've known for a long time and in a different format, and I get to learn so much in this format that you wouldn't otherwise, you know. So really appreciate you taking the time. How can people find you? What's the best way to connect with you? You
Yeah, hit
know,
me up on LinkedIn.
yeah.
Just, the good old platform for that. I do have Instagram. I never use it, but so I think LinkedIn's probably the place to do it. But yeah, it's Peter Bergenek at LinkedIn. And yeah, thanks a bunch, Zane, for inviting me over. This is super fun. Had a
Yeah.
blast talking to you, and it's the space, the growth design in general is always evolving. We reached a space where it was like, oh, PM and design is not needed. We have AI, and now it's kind of like reverting back from that. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for joining us, and be sure to check these out. Like every Wednesday, we're going to go live with different growth folks in the industry. So we have the next one coming up with folks from Adobe, and we're going to be talking about monetization. So make sure you tune in for that. And we'll also share some of these on recordings as well. And really appreciate everyone joining. So thanks everyone for coming to the Growth Roundup, and stay tuned for the next one. Thanks,
Thanks,
Peter. Really
everyone.
appreciate
It was
it.
a blast. And thank